coming a long way because, as you quite rightly said, we have a Ministry of Equal Opportunities, of equality between women and men. But this came a long way. So because it's more than a priority for the government, it's kind of a philosophy, something that started in the 1970s, and yeah, went till today. I'm not going to go through, all the history because that's not the time I have. So I'm just going to go through some basic things. Like in 1981, Luxembourg first legislated on equal access to work, training, lifelong learning, and basically working conditions, which at the time wasn't giving. Short after, even the Grand Duke made a decree that gave birth to a women in the workforce working group, which was supposed to analyze the women's situation in the working society. In parallel, the government opened up high-ranking military careers for women, which you might think is not really important, but for the government it was, because it was the only career that till then women could not access. And so to walk the talk, they opened it up. And all this led to the Ministry of Female Promotion in the 1989s, where you can still see that we're in a kind of rebellion phase, because we had the legislation granting equal access, we had a working group being created, and now there is a ministry and it's called Female Promotion. So still there's a kind of rebellious underlying message in that. Quite rightly, because it was very much needed. And shortly after, but for government speaking, it's shortly after. So in 1996, the parliament formed a commission around equality between women and men. And the government itself had inter-ministry bodies who discussed equality when legislation was passed, when decrees were released, even when the government opened up requests for proposals, which also was the date of the first official campaign related to equality as such. This was shortly followed by us signing the Amsterdam Treaty on Gender Mainstreaming, and then in 1998, we had legislation introducing the delegates of equality amongst the employee delegation, who's supposed till today to keep an eye on be it equal pay, be it non-discriminatory hiring processes, be it promotion processes, everything which is in relation to equality. In 1999, we introduced the law on parental leave, which I think, both Julian and Karen mentioned it when we speak about parental leave or women falling out of the workforce. We often tend to refer or to speak about children, but this is kind of a unilateral view, because we think that men too they can't have children, biologically speaking, yet, but they can make the choice to take care of the children or to take care of sick relatives, parents, for example, which will all go into this law on parental leave, which includes leave for other social means or needs as well. In 2001, we had legislation passed to protect pregnant women and also returning mothers in that case, or I wrote breastfeeding individuals because these days when you gender, it's becoming quite tricky in a sense to be completely inclusive, which we really try to be. And in 2004, this led to the Ministry of Female Promotion, but there is a mistake. It's not female promotion, or the Ministry of Female Promotion, sorry, became the Ministry of Equality. Yeah, because we wanted to pivot our approach towards being more inclusive ourselves. So we took away the female promotion and made it equality, which is more inclusive in a way. Although this then, in 2006, we had a constitutional change. So equality between women and men has now its own place in the Luxembourgish constitution, which before that point it didn't have. In 2010, then, as a symbolic sign, the rules of succession from our Grand Duke were changed as well, so that now, no matter if you're a woman or a man, you can succeed to the throne. We made it unlawful in 2015 to differentiate when it comes to benefits and bonuses in the financial services and in the insurance business. In 2016, we had the principle of equal pay included or written into law, amounting to an offense, actually, which at that point it wasn't. And finally, in 2018, the Ministry of Equality became the Ministry of Equality between women and men. Not to bore you with, but I think it's interesting to notice that it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that takes a lot of effort and also time and patience. So where I'm going to have a different presentation than my colleagues before is that I will focus more on kind of a philosophical approach, or who we are, what we do, and what we learned, how people perceive us, and which gave us more or less traction. And so we try to pivot on this, as you would pivot a business model. We pivoted our approach to how we speak about equality, where there's a big difference between equality and equity, which I'll come to shortly, because I think that's really, really important. And so to come back to what we do is really raising awareness, because we think that, and I think that Karen put it out when saying most of the inequalities are unintentional. They grow systemically, and it's not that it's done on purpose. It's because you're just so much into operations that you don't notice, which shouldn't be an excuse, and it isn't, but that's just an explanation maybe why we do not try to blame too much and not try to tell what's right and what's wrong. Rather, we try to help people seeing or get a perspective on what they're doing and where they are, societally speaking. So, of course, we provide the support, be it to like discover or to have the statistics right, and also to remediate to the situation, and we legislate. But most importantly, it's not what we're doing, it's what we're not doing. We do not create a shift between women and men, nor are we saying that women are better than men or men are better than women, because that's what we learned with experience, is what the public thought of us, that when we go out and we say, you need to do this for women, and they always heard the word women. And then we questioned this, because why are people so reluctant when we go out there and talk to them about equality? And even I today, when I go to see businesses and they'll tell me like, oh my God, here comes, the women guy. And it's really not about women. And neither do we want to make men out of women and vice versa. We really want to keep this diversity, and it should be kept that way. But it's really, really important to mention, although it's super basic, but this is what happened out there, and this is how we were perceived when dealing with these issues. It's the same thing when I talk about equality and equity, whereas you can say, why are you the Ministry of Equality between women and men? So not sure that's how we were called, but it's really about equity. It's giving the same chances, opportunities, and respect to everyone. I mean, and making no difference. But there again, this is not how it was perceived out there. And so to do all this, to raise this awareness, we have media campaigns around professional equality in all of its aspects. We have this committee on the government level, which is supposed to help government entities make equal choices, or at least equitable choices wherever possible. We publish materials around all aspects of the life of people, in the sense that we do from school books to senior citizen magazines, where we talk about equality, because we think that in order to have this going on in the future, you have to have a solid basis. And the basis will come from the children, and it needs to be supported now from active society. So we'll really try to act on all these levels, which brings us to being present at student fairs, at job fairs. We do workshop interventions, and so on. I mean, we recently joined the Equal Pay International Coalition to exchange further on the matter, but this is not something I want to go into, because I want to talk less about procedures and legal, but more really about how people see us and why they follow this philosophy of equality, and why they finally think that it's the right thing to do. And of course, we develop teaching material and promote gender equality throughout partners. The support, we have tools, and I heard the word before, like doing analysis on salary, which we have as well, but I'll come to that later on too. So classical things, brochures, and cooperation with social partners, which is very important, because we're not on our own, and who's better placed than people actually doing the work and being on the terrain, so to speak. And also supporting this function of gender delegates within the companies, which is really, really important. And although I said that after the rebellion, we didn't do shaming or peer pressure, but we created a help desk set up in cooperation with the Ministry of Labor, so that people are able to report when they think that they are not equally treated, which beforehand wasn't really possible. And if it was, it always entailed legal action. So we created a neutral ground for these kind of precedents to be put forward, and so that people wouldn't have to, you know, go the whole way from the start, because sometimes you think that something might be, and maybe it's not. And not to, you know, go into that direction, we said, hey, let's put or create something neutral where people can discuss first, and if there's a need, they can take legal steps after. Then we associate with social partners and representatives of the social society, of course, and to reflect on how to eliminate the remaining inequalities, because there's still a lot of them. And that's what was mentioned before, and I won't even get started on them, because there's no time for that either, about from the mental charge of women, and what women do, especially the unpaid work women are providing, which is huge compared to what men do, and so on. But that's something we might discuss later. We of course provide a platform to exchange route equality, because we think as a government, this is something we can easily do, like federate between the players and offer that kind of platform, which others, I mean, they might, and we invite everyone to do it, but who's better placed than we are in an objective kind of way to do this. So that's something we provide as well. And then finally, there's the LUGIP, so a tool to identify systemic pay discrimination. Again, because we think it's really unintentional and it's often systemic. So in cooperation with the Swiss government and the University of Bern, we provide this tool free of charge, where employers and even employees, if they are a gender delegate, for example, or if they are a designated employee, they can use the tool to look up if there are any systemic pay discriminations. And there too, maybe just to mention it, the tool goes a little bit further than just semi-logarithmic or like ordinary least squares regressions, as we call them, analysis. So you can go down to see if there are, based on a series of individual qualification characteristics, or sorry about that. It's like education, years of service, or professional experience, job-related factors, as some mentioned earlier on, levels of skills, if there are discriminations there. So to make it as objective as possible, and not just keep it to the median gap. Something which we're very proud of is our female board pool initiative as well, because we think that in order to have this change making an impact in the future, and even to happen, you need women in this decisive work pool. So more women in management, more women in board of directors. And often we hear that there aren't any women interested, we can't find any, and all that type of excuses in a way. So we launched an initiative which is called the Female Board Pool, where we help professionals, free of charge, of course, to screen for female candidates, and even go as far as offer them courses if needed, if there's a need to further qualifications, and so on. Then, as was mentioned as well, time is short often, and it's very demanding for employers to question themselves and to go this way of transparency, as well, as transparency is one of the key criteria to achieve equality of pay. There we created the Positive Action Program, as we call it. So it's a government-sponsored program assisting companies in becoming more equal, or at least discover in which areas they might be unequal or not just. On focusing on three pillars: the equal treatment of men and women in recruitment process, terms of remuneration, evaluation of qualifications, which is something that goes into the LUGIP. But we think if you're a big corporation, or even for SMEs, and especially in these times, it's critical, time is critical. So we'll help them out, and we will do it for them. Same as gender equality in decision-making, looking at promotions, access to continuous vocational training, equal participation in decision-making. How is this going forth within your company? How are people promoted? Are they promoted? What's the criteria? And so on. But again, just to give them the perspective and have this kind of self-reflection and not to point out things. It's really, I wouldn't say, if I now say hope, you can take me back on this, but experience show that if they notice, they will change something, because it's not in their interest and they know it. Same as equality in professional and private life, where taking parental leave, and this counts for men and for women, or for women and for men, that often there are no career plans. They have no idea what's happening when they come back, and so do the employers. Often they do not know. And I can tell you that we had the same discussions within the state, as even in the state or in the government, where people took parental leave and nobody had the clue who would replace or who would take up their workload and what would be their place in the institution when they come back. And this goes into how a task organized, the work-life balance is achieved and enhanced, where I can tell you that based on experience, everybody has it, and everybody will tell you, no, you can work half-time, full-time, 3/4, no matter, you're flexible. But all these questions coming with it, who is going to take up the workload? How is this unconscious bias amongst your colleagues who might take up some of your workload? How are you actually managing this, or have you even thought about it? It's the same thing, although in a different aspect, when people speak about diversity, and they forget that diversity means conflict management, which nobody actually really talks about. They all talk about how nice diversity is and how important it is, but with diversity comes conflict management, which is not addressed at all, at least not, or at least wasn't in Luxembourg. And this is something we want to change as well. So we legislate, of course. So gender discrimination or discrimination based on gender is an offense. And we even had discrimination based on gender written into the labor code. Same goes for the access to employment, selection criteria, recruitment conditions. So you cannot discriminate. This is against the law. And in autumn 2014, the government even committed to a target of at least 40% of female representatives in states either owned, which we have some, or companies where the state has a stake in them, have a board of directors composed of at least 40% of the underrepresented sex, which, of course, statistically speaking, are always women. There's a note which I included just to be complete, is that in 2019, we reached that quote, and we had more than 40%, well, there's 40.19% of women representing the state in decision-making bodies of public establishments. And establishments, of course, included in these where the state has a stake in. But let me come back to my favorite topic, is that we always speak about women and men, or gender, and which are two completely different definitions and have two completely different meanings. And we think in Luxembourg, at least, that women aren't unicorns. I mean, and neither are men, right? And this discussion, when you talk about either the one or the other, you still segregating them into pillars. And I like to compare it to playing a game, whereas we are the players and we always talk about the players. We talk about stereotypically, you need to enable women to, take up a management position in your company. So you have to, let's say, offer them a daycare where next to the company at best, or you have to be more flexible. But this is so player centric or focused on the persona. It's not focused on the system, because it's not, the woman is not the problem, or the woman. The system is the problem. And we think as long as you keep discussing around the players, you won't change the game, because it's too easy. It's like we saw that the gender pay gap took away the light or overshadowed the fact that women did not advance as did men in corporate structures. But as when we go there and we talk to the representatives, they will always tell us, oh, but what's the issue? Because we pay equally and we treat equally. And they could even show us that they would, but they wouldn't treat promotions equally. Although they can tell us that, hey, you know what, they had parental leave, or they they're women. Yeah, basically it's they're women, they had kids, and now they need to take care of the kids. But it's not because they're women, it's a choice. And the choice, the system doesn't incorporate the choice, and which works very, very nicely, is when you say it's not about the 50-50 question. And there comes, it's fighting our own stereotypes, right? It's really about getting on the same players field in terms of making it clear that the system needs to pivot as have the players, because these days, if you are a woman, let's say, and I'm very stereotypical now, and you get pregnant, you decide to take care of your kid. And I take a man who, stereotypically again, he goes cycling, let's say, he cycles 3 hours a day. So he needs to take time to cycle as well. And you never know, he might have a competition to attend to. So he has to take time off work to do this. And both of them will be in the same situation statistically, because they have less time to spend at work, and they will be less reliable in the terms of the employer, because one might have a child which gets sick and you have to attend to, and the other one might hurt himself doing sports. And I'm not even talking about people who decide to take care of their parents, for example, or who do charity work or whatever. But just to tell you that there needs to be a change in the system, and that's where we are working towards, to change, to have the systemic change and to have everybody on board. Because now we really talk about the one pillar and the other pillar, and we never actually combine them, and we do not speak about the needs and what's really happening, or why these differences come together and make or create these gaps. I see that I might run out of time with all these concepts, but I think the idea is clear. We have aligned interests, both of, I mean, women and men, aligned interests, and it's all only together that we can achieve them, and we need both of us to go there. And the only thing, at least, or the only way we see is going there together. Stop talking in pillars, stopping segregating, although statistically you have to have these indicators, sure, but in your daily work and your approach, you shouldn't have them. You should really concentrate on the game and not the players, and make this game as equal as possible. Yeah, I think I'll stop there and have the questions, because I'm more of an interactive dialogue guy. I prefer having the dialogue. So I'll say thank you. I have
Thank you, Maximilian. That was very interesting. Thank you very much for your presentation and for this mindset, because my mind was shattered. And I wanted to ask about this platform for opinion exchange. How did you implement it in your life? That platform was a Zoom, Teams, or working group, or Facebook? What kind of platform that was?
Thank you. It is a platform dedicated to the equality delegates, where they can log on and exchange in, you can compare it to sort of forum, where they put in their main concern or their question, and they have their peers responding to them. And what we try to do is use them as vectors. So we'll have equality delegates out of the public sector, out of the private sector, and out of the educational sector, because they all have similar issues, but very different views on how to cope with them. Uh, and in addition, this gives us a view on what currently is of an issue, and we can communicate with, be it, most of the time it's info material, it's just text-based, And once a year, we invite all of them together, although there was COVID for the last 2 months, but to gather and exchange on the topics of equality.
We have another question. Hello, thank you for this inspiring speech. And I have a practical question as well. Talking about this female board panel, as far as I understand, it helped, or it was kind of a database in order to find the candidates to work in the boards. Am I right? So the question was, did you measure and did you look into the usage rates? So how actively people use this pool?
Thank you. That's a very good question. Yes, we monitor. So yes, on it's basically a list of women that would be available or have time and competence to put up with the board position. And it's not as much used as we'd like to. There are prejudices, but we are not sure where they come from. And one thing I can tell you, and that's why I talked about conflict management, is that if you have a board composed of only men and the board position becomes available, and this goes into, if it would be women, I think philosophically or psychologically speaking, we would be on the same page, that they rather tend to choose one of their own rather than an outsider, and speaking in mentalities, because this creates conflict, and who wants conflict, right? Because that's not how we are raised or they were raised, and how management works these days. People, like, especially on board levels, take decisions fast and move on and do other things.
Hello, Maximilian.
Hi.
I have a personal question. Well, you see that we mostly have women in this audience, and I have noticed that in Latvia, when we discuss these issues, mostly there are women in participating in this discussion. So I want to ask you, what was your personal motivation to dive into these issues?
How much time do you have? Okay, I'll try to make it short. So I've come a long way as well. So I started for a big multinational corporation where I was responsible for the global lawyer network, a worldwide lawyer network, and I traveled a lot. I really traveled a lot, and as it happens, my then fiance and I, we became pregnant, and we had our first child. And I went to my boss and told him that, hey, you know what? I'm going to take parental leave. And this was back in 2006. And he told me, as being a Dutch company, it's a US company, but it's domiciliated in the Netherlands. And so he told me that, yeah, I mean, you're sure? Because there's a promotion waiting next year. You're going to become vice president of global procurement. And it's not really the best time to take parental leave. So like, well, who are you to judge? I mean, I think it's the best time to take parental leave, and I'm going to take parental leave. Whereas he said, yes, but couldn't you take parental leave half time? And at that time, I thought, no way, because why take half time, half pay, full work, because he's never going to let me work half. That's not going to happen because there's no reduction in workload, right? So I got fired, which was a blessing in disguise, actually, because I had a tremendous time with my kid at the time. Um, Even stayed at home a little bit longer, but uh, had the need after 1.5 years to go back and work. But I was emancipated in a way because my wife worked full time at the time in merger and acquisition. So she traveled a lot as well. And I was the stay at home dad, and looked for a half-time job. But I was a man. I'm still a man. I still am a man. And I got a lot of rejections because you can't just work half the time and be at home with your kids and be a man. Nah, that's not working. And that's where a first seed, I think, was planted about, why? I mean, why are you making a difference? The other thing is that at quite a young age, while I managed this lawyer network and traveling a lot, I saw that people, no matter what their professional position is or what their social position is, they all have the same needs and they all have the same issues. This now might say or sound blunt, but this is what made me do what I do today, because I like to question and to give this other perspective. And of course, I like to be challenged as well. It's not that I know everything, I don't know anything. It's just about challenging and changing perspectives. And that's, I think, what brought me here, and what keeps me going. Because I think that everybody should have the right to express her or himself uh, as they please. And it's always a systemic question. It's not a personal, it's like treating an illness. It's not the symptoms you have to treat. I mean, it's really the illness. And I don't want to sound negative. I just want to sound more macroeconomic, because that's the other thing which I always notice, that we speak too much of microeconomics and not enough about macroeconomics.
Thank you very much. And I think that is very interesting and very well. And basically, we need to say thank you to your previous employer for firing you, because we were lucky enough to hear about your experience. But I hope that we will be able to meet again and to continue discussing this topic.